Iran's Attorney General says that the country's morality police has now been dissolved. The decision follows months of protest triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini in custody. She died 3 days after she was arrested in September for failing to wear the hijab head covering correctly. The police have so far denied that they were responsible for her death. The morality police began work in the mid-2000s, set up to ensure that women wore long skirts and dresses, and also forbidding shorts and ripped jeans. The head coverings issue was also included in that. Let's talk about the situation in Tehran now with the Executive Director at the Afro Middle East Center, Jeenah. Naeem, a very good afternoon to you. Grateful for your time. So the suspension of the morality police, so-called morality police unit, does not mean the end, does it, of rules around the wearing of head coverings or modest dress for women in Iran?
You know, Temekila, I think much of the Western media has jumped the gun on this issue. The guidance patrols, as they are known in Iran, have not been dissolved. The Attorney General made the comment when he was asked at a conference about the fact that there wasn't a great visibility of the guidance patrols. He made the comment that these patrols were not controlled by the judiciary, and he's part of the judiciary. They were set up by the police and they were shut down by the police. That's all he said. The police have not made any comment about it. There's no indication that they have been abolished or shut down or anything.
Right.
What seems to be happening is that they've, in a sense, been recalled. They're not being seen in the streets, and they're not implementing the hijab law anymore.
You're right. You're quite right to correct that, Naeem, because we are wrong to say it's been dissolved, because the more accurate phrasing was that of a suspension. But there have been weeks of protests following the death of Mahsa Amini, A, because it's believed that the security or police in Iran were responsible for her death, B, a lot of younger women in Iran saying they want the laws to change. Do you think that the supreme leader and the government will eventually have to give in to that demand from the protesters who are still on the streets in some parts?
So they haven't been suspended either. But to come to your question, yeah, I mean the protests have been going on now for just over 2 months. Let's be clear, however, that the protests are not 24/7. They're not 24 hours a day, not 7 days a week. Mostly over the weekends, sometimes in the evenings, and not completely throughout the country. They are focused in certain areas. And this is why, you know, they've been going on for more than 2 months, and the government is able to, in some sense, contain them. Whether it will make any change to the laws, I mean, it remains to be seen, but there is a push from within the establishment, particularly kind of more reform-minded politicians, parliamentarians, etc., a push to revoke the headscarf law from the early 1980s. Of course, if the law is revoked, then the guidance patrols don't have much work to do. So there is that push within the establishment itself. I think that the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei will be very resistant to it. But if there's a substantial number of parliamentarians, for example, that push for it, it might become more difficult for him to oppose its revocation, especially if it's couched in a way to say that revoking the law will save the establishment.
But very briefly, Naeem, that would only be half the solution, because these protests have morphed into a bigger socio-political economic movement, because people are now complaining of government corruption, unemployment, poverty as well, which they say they want addressed immediately.
All of those are problems, and all of those, particularly the socio-economic issues, can't really, well, corruption can be addressed immediately. The others can't be addressed immediately until American sanctions are lifted. They've been in place for more than 4 decades. The economy is in a mess, and partly it's because of the sanctions. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenging time, and the protesters are correct, and I'm not sure that the government can do much about it.
Naeem, Jeenah, pity we didn't have more time. Naeem is the Executive Director at the Afro Middle East Center. Thank you for your time today.